My mother-in-law was unaware that I earned $75,000 a month. During dinner she publicly mocked me, saying, "You're just a parasite living off my son." Her words stung, but the next morning, she found out who actually paid off her entire mortgage without telling her. My name is Noelle, and I've been married to Marcus for 4 years now. I'm 38 and run a small but wildly successful software consulting business from our home in Austin, Texas. I've been working in this field since I was 25. I don't wear suits, I don't go into an office, and I don't explain my invoices to anyone who's not my client. I started with small contracts, picked up traction during the pandemic, and eventually carved out a niche so strong that I now earn around $75,000 a month. And no, I don't flaunt it. Marcus knew about my earnings, of course. He's never once made me feel weird or competitive about it. He works in nonprofit administration, smart with money, thoughtful, and very grounded. He doesn't make nearly what I do, but that's never been an issue between us. We split expenses proportionally, talk openly about money, and live pretty comfortably in a home I purchased under both our names. But his mother, Claudine, came from a different world. She's 65, retired, and has lived in San Antonio her whole life. She taught high school English for decades, raised her kids with a tight budget and a tighter grip, and never really adjusted to modern dynamics, especially when it came to women working from home, tech jobs, or not having kids by 30. From day one, she seemed unsure about me. She wasn't mean outright. She was tactfully undermining. Every time we visited, she'd have something passive to say, "Must be nice to not have to go to work in the morning," or "What do you even do with all that free time?" And Marcus would awkwardly change the subject while I smiled and pretended I didn't hear. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'd bring her books I thought she'd like, send her flowers on her birthday, and offer to help with chores when we visited. I even paid for her new dishwasher last year after hers broke, and I did it through Marcus so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Then a few months ago, Marcus casually mentioned during one of our walks that Claudine was struggling with her mortgage. She'd refinanced a few years back and was now underwater with rising interest. She hadn't said anything to us directly, but he found some old paperwork in her kitchen on a recent visit and saw how behind she was. Without making a big deal of it, I asked for the loan servicer's name and did a little research. After a few phone calls, I found out exactly what she owed, $78,432.12 to be exact. I had the money. I'd had a fantastic quarter and was sitting on plenty of savings. So I set up a payment through a legal trust account I used for discretionary philanthropy and made the full payoff. No fanfare. No email. No name. Just a note that said, "Paid in full." No further action required. I didn't even tell Marcus at first. I didn't do it to impress anyone or for her to owe me anything. I just did it because it seemed like the right thing to do. And then came Thanksgiving. We invited Claudine and Marcus's younger sister, Mabel, to our place. I spent 2 days preparing the meal: turkey, stuffing, mac and cheese, the works. Marcus took care of the wine and dessert. Everything looked perfect. I wore a dress I'd bought months ago but never worn, and I was genuinely excited. I thought maybe, just maybe, this dinner could go by without incident. That dream lasted until the second glass of wine. We were halfway through dinner, laughter had started to die down, and Claudine suddenly asked me again, for what had to be the 10th time in 3 years, "So, Noelle, tell me what it is you actually do?" I was mid-bite. I answered calmly, "I'm a software consultant. I help streamline operations and automate internal systems for large companies." She squinted. "But like, from your kitchen?" Mabel snorted. Claudine continued, "I just don't get how that's a real job. Marcus goes to work every day and you, what? Lounge around and send emails? I mean, you're just a parasite living off my son." She laughed. She laughed. Marcus dropped his fork. I was quiet. Not because I was shocked, but because I didn't want to cry in front of her. I swallowed the rest of my food, stood up, and started clearing the dishes. Marcus called after me, but I shook my head. I just needed to get away from the table. Later that night, after Claudine and Mabel had left, without offering to help clean, Marcus came into the kitchen and hugged me from behind. "I'm so sorry," he said. "She was way out of line." "It's fine," I whispered. "She just doesn't know." "What do you mean?" I looked at him and finally told him. About the mortgage. About trust. About the full payment. His eyes widened. "You did what?" I nodded. "A month ago." He didn't say anything right away. Then he hugged me again, tighter this time. "You're incredible." But I didn't feel incredible. I felt humiliated. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus. My sleep had been shallow, restless, haunted by Claudine's words and the icy silence that had followed. The kind of sleep where you replay one conversation over and over again, wishing you'd said something sharp and clever but knowing your silence had probably spoken louder. I sat in the kitchen nursing my coffee, watching the sunrise filter in through the back windows. I should have felt smug. Vindicated, even. I had all the moral high ground in the world. But I didn't. I just felt tired. And strangely, guilty. Not because I regretted helping her, but because part of me hated that she'd never have known the truth if it weren't for that scene she caused. I wanted no recognition for what I did, until her words made it feel like I needed it just to protect my own dignity. Marcus joined me around 8 a.m. He was still groggy, in pajama pants, rubbing sleep out of his eyes. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I lied. "You want me to talk to her?" I shook my head. "No. I'm going to drive down to San Antonio today." He looked surprised. "Seriously?" "I want to handle this myself." He hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good idea, babe. You know how she gets." "I do," I said. "That's why I'm going." The drive to San Antonio was unusually quiet. No podcasts, no music. Just the low hum of the engine and the occasional whoosh of passing cars. The more I neared her neighborhood, the heavier my chest felt. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. I didn't want a fight, I wanted understanding. But I wasn't sure I'd get it. Claudine answered the door in a floral robe, slippers on her feet, a coffee mug in her hand. She looked shocked to see me. Her surprise wasn't even subtle. "Noelle," she said. "Is something wrong?" "I'd like to talk," I said. "If now's a good time." She stepped aside and I entered. The living room looked just like it always did, neat, but full of dated furniture and decor from another era. Family photos covered the walls. I noticed a new one of Marcus as a teenager I hadn't seen before. Still no sign of me. She offered me a seat, and I took it. "I wanted to clear the air," I began. "About last night." Claudine sat across from me, crossing her arms. "I was just being honest." "You called me a parasite." She didn't flinch. "I've never asked you for anything, Claudine," I said. "I don't depend on Marcus financially. In fact, I pay for more than half of our expenses." "The house you visited last night?" "That was bought with my income." "And the kitchen you implied I lounge around in all day?" "That's where I earn a living, more than a living." Her expression shifted slightly, but she still said nothing. "I know you've been struggling with your mortgage," I continued. "Marcus didn't tell me outright, but I figured it out. And I didn't want you to lose your home." Her brows furrowed. "So I paid it off." "Last month." Claudine blinked. "You what?" "I paid it off," I repeated. "In full. Through trust. You would have gotten the confirmation by now, unless you tossed it out." She stared at me like I had just spoken in another language. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She picked up her mug, then set it down again. I could see it hitting her in real time. The shock, the disbelief, the stubborn pride trying to hold on even while reality cracked through it. "But, Why? She finally asked. I took a deep breath. Because I wanted to. Because I thought it would help. Because I love your son. And because I was raised to help when I can, not to gloat about it. There was a long silence. I didn't push it. I just let her sit with it. Eventually, she said, I didn't ask for your help. I know. I didn't want, I know that, too. Another pause. Then, softer, I didn't think you had that kind of money. I gave a sad smile. That's the problem, Claudine. You didn't think so. You assumed. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were neatly filed, but her fingers trembled slightly. I thought you just sat around while Marcus worked, she said, almost to herself. I thought you were coasting. I've been working since I was 16, I said. My father was a janitor and a mechanic. I put myself through college with scholarships and coding gigs. I built a business from the ground up. I don't advertise it because I don't need to. But that doesn't mean I'm not working. Another long silence. Finally, she stood up and walked into the kitchen without a word. I heard the faucet run. A cabinet is open. The clink of a teacup. When she came back, she handed me a cup of hot chamomile tea and sat down again. Still no apology. But that was Claudine. She didn't offer many apologies. I knew that going in. After a few minutes, she spoke again, quietly. I guess I owe you some thanks. You don't owe me anything, I said. But I'd appreciate some respect. She nodded. And that was it. No grand apology. No hugging or tears. Just a moment. A crack in the wall. I drove back to Austin later that afternoon. Marcus was waiting for me on the porch, his face a mix of curiosity and concern. How did it go? She knows now. And? She didn't apologize. But I think something shifted. He nodded slowly. Good. We went inside. I changed into sweats, curled up on the couch, and finally let myself relax for the first time in what felt like days. I hadn't done what I did to prove a point. But maybe the point got made anyway. The weeks after Thanksgiving passed without much fanfare. I wasn't expecting a parade or even an acknowledgement beyond the terse thank you I'd managed to extract from Claudine. But something was different. Subtle, almost imperceptible at first. She started texting Marcus more often. Asking how work was going, whether we were eating enough greens, whether we had any holiday plans. She even sent over a picture of a homemade bread loaf she'd baked just for fun, a small attempt at opening a door, maybe. He noticed it, too. She hasn't sent me a photo of her baking anything since I graduated college, he said one evening, holding his phone out to show me the golden brown lump of bread in his messages. Maybe she's softening, I replied, half smiling. Or maybe you knocked the wind out of her with that mortgage payment. I laughed, but the truth was, I wasn't trying to knock anything out of anyone. I just wanted peace. Respect, if not warmth. And Claudine, as stubborn as she was, seemed to understand that now. About 2 weeks before Christmas, she called me. It was a short call. Awkward. I was wondering, she said, voice tight, what books you'd recommend for someone trying to understand tech stuff. Like, Your World. I blinked. I was in the middle of folding laundry, holding a pair of socks in one hand and my phone in the other. My world? You know. Software. The work you do. Just curious. It wasn't much. But it was something. She wanted to understand. Or maybe she wanted to convince herself she'd never made the comments she made that night. Either way, I didn't push it. I emailed her a few beginner resources. One was a short ebook on systems consulting. Another was a link to a free course on automating small business tasks using no-code tools. I kept it light. Accessible. Nothing that required her to go beyond her comfort zone. She emailed back 3 days later. Interesting stuff. More complicated than I thought. Marcus and I spent Christmas Eve at her house, as planned. I offered to bring the main course, and she actually said yes this time. No backhanded comments about store-bought versus homemade. Just a simple, that would be helpful. I made roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, and a big bowl of citrus arugula salad. She made green bean casserole and a pie, pecan, Marcus's favorite. The meal was quiet but not cold. At one point, Mabel asked what we were up to these days, and Claudine, before I could even speak, jumped in with, "Noelle works with big corporations, helping them fix the way they do things. All this tech automation stuff. Very modern. Complicated." I nearly choked on my water. Marcus shot me a look. I gave the smallest possible nod in return. That was the closest Claudine would ever come to a compliment. As we packed up to leave that night, she walked us to the front door, an old wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Drive safe," she said. "We will," Marcus replied. "Thank you for dinner." She turned to me and said, "And thank you for the chicken. It was really good." Another first. "Anytime," I replied, genuinely. She paused, then added, "You know, I was wrong. About what I said at Thanksgiving." I blinked. "I shouldn't have called you that. It wasn't fair." I didn't understand. I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Claudine. That means a lot." We said goodbye, and Marcus and I got in the car. He was the first to speak. "Did that just happen?" "Yup. Should we play the lottery?" I laughed. "Maybe just enjoy the miracle while it lasts." But it wasn't just a one-time miracle. After New Year's, Claudine started sending me little things. Articles she thought I might find interesting. Links to local community courses on tech. Even a forwarded newsletter about women in business that I'd subscribed to myself years ago. It was subtle. Her way of reaching out without outright asking for closeness. But I recognized the effort. It didn't erase everything she'd said that night, of course. Words like parasite don't just dissolve because someone changes their tone. But I didn't need a complete transformation. I just needed the space to breathe, to be who I was without suspicion or scorn. Marcus noticed the change, too. One afternoon, while we were working side by side at our kitchen table, he looked up from his laptop and said, "You know, she's never apologized to anyone before. Not even when she backed into a neighbor's mailbox and blamed it on the wind." I chuckled. "That sounds like her. But she apologized to you. And now she's quoting tech blogs. People surprise you." He tilted his head. "I think you surprised her. She was so committed to believing you were something you weren't, and you completely shattered it. Quietly. Gracefully." "I don't know if grace is the word," I replied. "It took everything in me not to scream at her that night." "But you didn't," he said. "You did something better." We didn't talk about it much after that. The whole thing just receded, like a storm that rolled through and left behind clean air. The relationship between Claudine and me settled into a new pattern, still guarded, still polite, but more open than before. She didn't start inviting me to spa weekends or calling me her daughter-in-law of the year. But the tension that used to hang over every visit like a low ceiling had lifted. Even Mabel, who'd been all too happy to laugh at Claudine's Thanksgiving jab, had toned down the snide remarks. Maybe Claudine told her. Maybe not. But something had shifted there, too. Then, one day in March, Claudine sent a group text to Marcus and me, thinking of doing some renovations to the back porch. "Would love your input, Noelle, since you've got an eye for design." I stared at the message for a moment. Not because I didn't know how to respond. But because for the first time since I'd joined Marcus's family, I felt like I had a place in it. I typed out a response to Claudine's porch renovation text, "Happy to help. Let me know when you'd like me to come by." Short. Neutral. Kind. But inside, I was surprised. Not because she wanted my opinion, by now, she'd grown accustomed to my role as a competent woman who got things done, but because she asked. The Claudine I'd known a year ago would have rather nailed shingles to her own hand than let me pick out paint samples. So I drove down to San Antonio the following Saturday. It was early spring, and her backyard was filled with the scent of cut grass and newly blooming gardenias. She had a few photos laid out on her patio table, screened porch extensions, rustic deck finishes, pergolas from a catalog with dog-eared corners. I was thinking about replacing the old lattice, she said, sipping iced tea. Make the back a little more livable. Since I don't have to worry about the mortgage anymore. She glanced at me, just for a second. Not with shame, not even with pride, just a kind of sober acknowledgement. I think that's a great idea, I said. You've got the space for something really beautiful. We spent a quiet 2 hours going over options. I helped her figure out measurements, looked at her budget, even sketched out a few layouts. And then she said something that surprised me more than anything she'd said before. I've been telling Mabel she needs to stop wasting time waiting for some guy to take care of her. Told her she should look into starting something of her own. Maybe learn a skill. A trade. I looked up, startled. She thinks she's too old to learn. She's 33, Claudine continued, shaking her head. I told her about you. Told her you built your business from scratch. That you work harder than anyone I know. I said nothing at first. Just let that sentence float there in the sun between us. She glanced up again. I didn't see it before. But I do now. It wasn't a confession. It was a conclusion. A slow one, hard-earned. But real. And I nodded, accepting it. Later that evening, as I packed up my notes and prepared to head back to Austin, she stood beside me at the door. I know I've been difficult, she said. I smirked. You've been Claudine. That made her laugh, genuinely, this time. Before I stepped outside, she added, you didn't have to pay that mortgage. You didn't have to be kind after what I said. But you were. I was wrong. About you. About a lot of things. I took a deep breath and finally let myself feel what I'd been holding back since that Thanksgiving dinner. That little flame of satisfaction. Not the cruel, gloating kind. But the kind that settles in your chest like warm tea on a cold morning. The kind that says, you kept your dignity, and you won. Because yes, this was a win. Not a shouted takedown or a dramatic showdown. Not an email sent in rage or a scene made in front of the family. But a long, patient arc of justice. A woman judged me by the cover she thought she understood. And I rewrote the entire book, without ever having to raise my voice. A few months later, Claudine stood beside me on her brand new porch, sipping lemonade. We were watching Marcus put up hanging string lights while Mabel helped stain the new deck. Claudine wore a wide-brimmed hat and a soft expression. I still don't fully get what it is you do, she said. That's okay, I smiled. Most people don't. But I get that it matters, she added. And that you matter. She paused, then added under her breath, Marcus married up. I nearly dropped my drink. What was that? I teased. Don't make me say it twice, she snapped, but there was a grin tugging at her mouth. It wasn't the kind of revenge you read about in novels. No enemies burned to the ground. No big reveal at a wedding. No viral video. It was quiet. Personal. Lasting. Claudine now knew the truth. She respected me because I gave her no other choice, by being exactly who I was, without needing to prove anything. That Thanksgiving night, I had walked away from her cruelty. Today, I stood beside her in forgiveness.